Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, still coming in hot from Dubai. Before we get started, we have an absolutely elite guest today coming on the show. I can't wait to get into this one. I'm still at this beautiful condo in Dubai, and there are some exotic birds here that are probably worth a lot of money and are quite beautiful. Maybe they'll get some FaceTime on the show. Maybe I'll bring the laptop over so you guys can see them. But if you hear some squeaking, some speaking, barking, I don't know what birds, I don't know how you quantify that in the background, my apologies. There's nothing I can do, so they are part of this show. But enough of the birds, time for the intro. And guys, this is going to be an absolute banger. Today we have the one and only Joseph Chalom on the show today, who joined SharpLink as the co-CEO, bringing with him over 20 years of institutional leadership at the intersection of TradFi and digital assets. He's also the former managing director and head of strategic ecosystem partnerships at BlackRock, where he was instrumental in driving the firm's global strategy across digital assets, fintech innovation, and blockchain infra. Super pumped, Joseph. Welcome to the show, my friend. Pumped to have you on. How you doing this good morning?
I am doing great, and I look forward to having a fun episode, and the birds don't bother me at all. It's awesome.
I love that. I wish more guests were like you and for this chill coming off the hop. Okay, let's jump right into it. SharpLink, what a story. I remember hearing about it when it came live a couple months ago. The chart went wild. The Ethereum buys went wild. Up until, I want to say, you guys sort of even really kicked off the big buying parade. Most companies deploy a couple $1 million and they don't do it quickly either. You guys came in, ripped it up, vicious pace, vicious buy, and were really one of the big catalysts, at least in my eyes, and I could be wrong here, for the recent drive in Ethereum price and just Ethereum adoption. Ethereum is back. It's sexy again. It's front of mind again. We love to see it. Tell me a little bit about SharpLink and what you guys are doing there. And then, we'll hop around. We'll talk about BlackRock. We'll talk about the huge opportunity that Ethereum provides. Talk about all of crypto. We'll talk about DATs. But to kick us off here, Joseph, tell us the goods on SharpLink.
Sure. SharpLink is a digital asset treasury company exclusively focused on Ethereum, and our reserve asset is obviously Ether. And in some ways, it's the simplest business you can imagine. Tell the story about why you believe there's a long-term Ethereum opportunity, not a short-term trade. Accumulate capital from investors in a whole bunch of different ways. Take those dollars, buy Ether, and stake it in a way that's really beneficial for the ecosystem. And if you do that really well, and you tell the story and you're really transparent, you can drive incredible long-term value for investors. First, the capital appreciation of Ether, and second, staking in a public company. So it's a really simple business model, but it's not just an investment vehicle. We're going to be doing really interesting things with that ETH to support the community and to bootstrap protocols. So it's a very simple and focused business.
I love that. Walk me through some of these combos with the big dogs, the BlackRocks, the largest TradFi firms. Again, we'll go into BlackRock later, but I also am involved in this space, but the show is about you, not me. When I've spoke with folks, TradFi folks who don't get a lot about crypto, and then you tell them about crypto, I'm obviously speaking about Hyperliquid. You are speaking about Ethereum. I still love Ethereum. I still hold Ethereum. They must be oohing and on at this. Not only do you guys hold and invest in an asset that, again, you and I are biased, that we both think will write some value, you guys have an incredible yield on that value. And then you'll get to obviously jig and jag and have a lot of fun within the ecosystem and participate and give back to the community as well. What's the sentiment been so far, talking with the big dogs on Wall Street?
I think having spent 20 years at BlackRock, having led digital assets, we spent years explaining, not convincing, but explaining to people, what is Bitcoin? What is Ethereum? What are these network effects? And to be honest with you, it was shocking how little they understood, but shocking how quickly they got it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It took explaining, not convincing. And I think the Ethereum story is completely different than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the sole digital gold store of value. It belongs in everyone's portfolio as a uncorrelated asset that can make a lot of asymmetric upside. And it just, over the long run, doesn't really do much more. Put it in your portfolio, hold it. It's uncorrelated, and it does a great job. Ethereum is harder to explain. It is a store of value. At times, it's been deflationary, but the upside is completely different. and I'm going to go into really futuristic ideas here, but we are at the point and we're explaining to institutions that Ethereum is at an inflection point. It is a fundamentally new type of public infrastructure. Joe Lubin, my partner and a co-founder of Ethereum, would explain it as a giant world computer that has this incredible universal settlement layer that it underpins. And it's intended not to be a network. It's not a payments network. It is really designed to be the connective tissue for a global economy that is in massive transition. And the reason why we explain it as, yes, it's a store of value, but we're almost at an internet-like moment where you can bet on that internet-like growth that's going to come on this network.
Great.
I'd love to share why I think it's different. I think the real world economy that I've lived in for many years, it really lacks trust. You need contracts and risk management. And what Ethereum's trying to do is just fundamentally anchor that trust in a decentralized cryptographic consensus. And the whole world for generations has been assuming that central intermediaries are what creates that trust. And I think it provides a completely different infrastructure and a new foundation of trust.
Yeah, well said there. Again, we can go we unfortunately we don't have time for a Joe Rogan 3-hour banger. We'll save that for round 2. That'll be a treat. And we'll do that in New York City. I'll come down. We'll get set up for a proper podcast. But for the sake of speed on this one, and I get asked this all the time, why invest in a DAT company, a digital asset treasury co, or a crypto corporate treasury co, whatever you want to call it? Why invest in a DAT company versus an ETF? My answer here is probably the same as yours, but I'd love to hear from you. And I get this question all the time, and I'm sure you get it more than I do.
Sure. I think it's a really, really simple answer, but it's evolved. So if you go back 3-4 years ago, the only way you can get access to Ether, the token that secures Ethereum, was to go buy it, put it in your wallet, maybe use a custodian.
Yeah.
You do it through MetaMask, you do it through Phantom, you might do it through Coinbase, and you own that spot Ether. You have to figure out how to secure it. You got to figure out how to stake it. You got to figure out the tax consequences. But actually, that was the early way people got access, and that was amazing. When I was at BlackRock, we had worked for years to figure out, as a bridge, most institutions and most individuals who are not crypto native don't want to do all of that. They want the exposure. They want to hold it. So why not do something like take a highly cryptographic asset like Ethereum and wrap it in a really boring wrapper that all of financial services is used to, which is an exchange traded product. You probably own that in your portfolio anyways. So the exchange traded product, first Bitcoin, which came out in January of 24, and then Ethereum in July of 24, gave people an easy way to access ETH. And that was a huge success, and it brought mindshare and institutional capital and interest, and it was amazing. And I'm quite proud of what we did. Why own it in a public company? Well, an ETH ETF today, you can own the ETH, but in the US, the SEC doesn't allow the ETF to stake it.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons to own ETH is it's a super productive asset. It works for you, unlike Bitcoin. To own the asset, but not get the 3-4% yield on that is suboptimal. And then we do expect the SEC to eventually approve staking in ETFs. The challenge there, and the ETF issuers will explain it themselves, is they have to be ready to redeem investors every single day. And that's great, but when you stake ETH, it used to take 4 or 5 days to stake and unstake. Today, the unstaking queue is 21 days. So you can't stake all the ETH. You probably can't even stake 50% ETH in an ETF, because you need to make sure that when people come to the exit line, they get their dollars back that day.
Bingo.
So even when they can stake, it's going to be smaller. In a SharpLink digital asset treasury, in a NASDAQ listed company, you just buy the stock. You get the ownership of the ETH. You get the full staking yield. There's no management fees. And in a public company, the revenue coming from staking gets a forward multiple. So you not only get exposure in a simple trade, but you can hold it and watch it appreciate. So I think owning ETH yourself is great. Many can't. Owning the ETF is great, but you're not going to get the staking yield. This is a smarter way to own ETH for most people, which is why Michael Saylor was so successful
Yep.
in strategy. This just has a yield twist that Bitcoin doesn't have. So I know that was a long explanation. They're all great products. We think this is the smarter way to own it today.
Yeah, well said. The other thing I'd add, which doesn't, this isn't so much why ETF versus why DAT. It's more so why holding Ethereum versus why holding it in a public vehicle. I mean, the tax-free exposure, like, come on, that is just, in Canada, we have the TFSA, we have the RSP, we have the TFSA, or excuse me, the FHSA, the first time home buyers account, all tax-free. In the States, you guys have your Roth IRAs. You can literally have Ethereum exposure in a tax-free investment vehicle. That is incredible. Who wouldn't want access to that?
Thank you. Do you want to work for SharpLink? You're amazing too.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yes, I'm available for hire.
Yeah.
Okay, SharpLink versus other DAT codes. This is something I have to ask. We've obviously seen a new player come to the block, buy a boatload of ETH, and maybe we'll make this a two-part question. Sort of talk about just your market position versus the other Ethereum DATs, and then on top of that, maybe just give, and this is a tough one, so my apologies, but maybe just give to the listeners how this game works, how you can sort of raise a boatload of money, how, with you can find there's locked ETH, you can do in-kind contributions where you can swap ETH for stock, convertible debentures. We don't need to get into all of it because, again, that would be a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast in and of itself. Sure. And this is a lot of TradFi speak that perhaps the crypto folks listening wouldn't understand either. It's very complex, very high level. But again, what differentiates you guys, Joseph, from your competitors? And secondly, maybe just tie in how this game works from a financial instrument level.
Sure. So the first thing is we actually are really excited that we're not the only ETH treasury company. If you have a thesis and no one else has it, that's a pretty lonely place.
I love that.
So let's just start with, if you're in it for Ethereum in the long run, we want many entrants to be successful here. So that's number one. Number two, there's this word that's strange. It's called co-opetition. You cooperate, but you compete at the same time. And that's not a dirty word. So the fact that multiple groups of people who are attracting capital with Wall Street and institutional backgrounds are leading these DAT treasuries tells you that there's a thesis here. And I want to get to that later, the Ethereum long-term investment thesis. So that's good. We are the second largest DAT company. We have somewhere around $3.7 billion of ETH. I mean, raising $3.7 billion in a short period of time, I think is amazing.
That is no easy feat. That is incredible.
No easy feat. So let's take a step back and say, we're excited. We're the second largest. The largest is Bitminer. Tom Lee is the chairman. I know him well. I admire him. He is an incredible explainer of not just macro trends, but financial trends. And he's wonderful. We are built a little bit different, and we differentiate ourselves in 3 ways. We are the most institutional, meaning that we're building teams. We're largely trying to do this ourselves through a really thoughtful risk managed approach. When we raise that capital, and I'll explain how we do it in a minute, because I know it's a 6-part question, Matt. When we raise that capital, we largely go out and get the ETH exposure ourselves. We stake it through the ecosystem. We have an incredible ability to source those opportunities. So we're building an on-premise team with that risk management capability and corporate governance. So that's the first distinction. The second is actually even more powerful. We are partnered at the hip with Consensus. And for those who don't know Consensus, you should. Joe Lubin is our chairman. He's a co-founder of Ethereum. He's the founder and CEO of Consensus, which is the most experienced Ethereum development, builder, and commercial company in the world. And we're not here on an island trying to figure out ourselves. We have access to the deepest minds in Ethereum to find those opportunities.
You have one of the goats of not only Ethereum, but all of crypto.
And an amazing,
should be noted. Yes.
And an amazing team under him. So when I need to figure out how to stake and where the DeFi opportunities are, and how to understand the smart contract risks in portfolios, I don't have to outsource that. I go right to the source. And the third is we want to be more than just like an investment vehicle. We're not a hedge fund. Yes, we're a vehicle that allows people to get exposure to ETH, capital appreciation, and staking, but we plan on also building operating companies that will support the Ethereum ecosystem. We're in it for the long run. And think about the idea of building operating companies that are not only can support the Ethereum ecosystem, but can generate revenue in ETH. That becomes a pretty good flywheel. So like we welcome the competition. We want everyone to be successful because it's good for Ethereum and Ether. Second part, like what are the mechanics of how this work? You don't just instantly declare yourself a DAT treasury company and just somehow or another you have 3.7 billion of ETH in your treasury. It's actually complicated and simple at the same time. So you have to explain to investors what your thesis is. I'm trying to do this on your podcast. And then you actually have to raise equity. And there's a few ways to do it. We do it primarily through something called an at-the-market facility. It's an ATM. It's not the kind of ATM where you put a credit card in and you take out cash. It's an ability every day to issue new stock to people who want to buy your stock. So most stock trading, you have buyers and sellers away from the company, and they're just exchanging your stock on a secondary market or exchange. Here, you can hire a bank who can find the people who are interested in buying your stock and issue new shares.
Yeah.
So you are issuing new shares on a periodic basis in a really smart way. You only issue shares when it's accretive to investors. You take those dollars and you go out and buy and stake ETH.
Yeah.
So you do that over and over, day after day, and you rinse and repeat, and you accumulate dollars, you accumulate ETH, and you put it to work. There is also an opportunity to do it through what's called equity linked or convertible bonds, where the interesting thing about Ether is it's really volatile. And that's not a dirty word. There are a lot of investors who want to trade that volatility. You can raise money through a convertible bond, take those proceeds and use it to buy ETH. And then the beautiful thing about ETH is you probably have some interest payments to make on that bond. Guess what? ETH generates yield. So it's a really good treasury asset, and I'm excited. If
Well
you
said.
can't tell from my voice,
No,
I'm
of
really
course.
excited.
I love that you're fired up about this. I want to talk about the ATMs for a bit. We've had an opportunity to do an ATM as well. If you want to be one of the biggest and the baddest, and again, it's a different game in Canada, way, way different than USA. But doing an ATM, and this happens to the chart a lot of times, the initial run up is quite vicious. There's a little drawdown that's also quite vicious because it takes time to create that, long-term revenue generating model. And of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch in life. We're not going to get into the, we're not going to cross the I's and T's of the ATM, but perhaps just some clarity on the long-term vision. Again, when I have a guest on the pod, I always look at I look at the chat forums, I look at Twitter, I look at Reddit. In this case, take a peek on Wall Street Bets, the whole 9 yards, and the people are like, well, what happened to the chart? Now, I agree long-term that you guys are going to accrue a stupendous amount of volume. This is going to be an incredible long-term bet because you're giving access to TradFi into one of the best assets of all time that is still, quite frankly, in almost its infancy stage. And then on top of that, you're going to create a massive revenue generating flywheel in the yield itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not even getting into the forward looking stuff like what you talked about in creating those operating businesses that will also be money printers and great qualitative parts for the Ethereum ecosystem as well. So on the ATM, just maybe explain a little bit more about how it works when you get a bunch of that money and the chart does obviously have to take a downfall. I don't think there's been one ATM deal in the history of DATs where the chart hasn't taken a downfall. But if you look at it right now, it's going to go back on the way up.
Yeah. So most of the DATs, and this happened at SharpLink before I joined, most of the DATs, they get initial funding through a private offering called a PIPE.
Yeah.
In our case, we raised $425 million from a bunch of investors. And what happens is you take over a company that's very small. It has a very small float of outstanding shares. You raise money through something called a PIPE, and there's tremendous interest but not a lot of shares. So
Yep.
that demand supply mismatch makes the stock really pop. I think, SharpLink went up to 80 in a very quick. And what happens is the initial investors eventually unlock and they could sell.
Exactly.
So you have this kind of artificial pop, and then it drops when there's selling pressure. That is how most people bootstrap themselves. That's what we did. We haven't done a pipe. The daily issuance of ATM is completely different
Yep.
because there's no lock and unlock. You issue shares in the ATM and you raise capital when your multiple to NAV is more than one.
Exactly.
Meaning when the value of your enterprise is greater than the value of your ETH, you raise money in an ATM. For the periods of time when you're not, you don't. And right now, most DAT Treasury companies are going through a bit of a
Yep.
period where their multiple to NAV is less than one. It would not make sense
Exactly.
to issue new shares. So we don't do that. And there's a lot of myths, and I want to disabuse a few of them. We don't issue shares through the ATM when our multiple is less than one. We've never done it,
Yep.
and we won't.
Yep.
In fact, we bought back stock because that's the greatest thing you could do for shareholders. When
100%.
your mNAV is less than one, we have no debt. We have no obligation to sell our ETH. And there's a lot of FUD in the space. And on the one hand, you have to communicate what you're really doing and not. On the other hand, I can't manage my life based on FUD. I'm always going to do what's right in the long term. So
Exactly.
there's a story there. I think in the long run, you're going to see us and others raise a tremendous amount of ETH. There is one thing I haven't shared is the ATM works when your stock is liquid, meaning when
Yeah.
there's a lot of daily trading volume, and Bitminer and us have had over 95% of the trading volume in ETH treasuries. When you have that trading volume, you can raise in an ATM. If you don't, you can't even raise capital. So it's
100%.
really technical. I would focus on the long run. We're always going to do the right thing by shareholders. And we think we're in the early innings. You should collect and stack as much ETH as you can right now when the price is under 4,500. So
Yeah, well said. Joseph, you're on a roll. Got to take a quick break. Give a huge shout out to our sponsor, the show, Crime XBT. When we get back, and I cannot wait for this, Joseph is going to go on a long-term rip and give us the goods on the long-term investment thesis. You just heard him say, if you can snag ETH below 4,500, go do so. Call your grandma, call your grandpa, go to the retirement home, get all those guys on ETH, get everyone on ETH. But until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love the team at Prime XBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, CryptoNews50, all in word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Okay, now for my favorite part of the show here. I'm an ETH guy. I've been telling people to go on ETH. I will say, though, I'm always honest. There was probably a year stretch, Joseph, on the Crypto News podcast where I would shit on ETH. Hand on the heart, hand on the shoulder. I'm not going to say I've always been a full-on ETH maxing and ETH bull. Is it a little hypocritical? It is. I think we all are in some capacity. And, I gotta give my head a shake and do a little better in that regard. But there was a time when I thought ETH was just lagging behind. This was when Solana was getting a lot of momentum. I felt like ETH sort of lost its ethos in some capacity. There wasn't a lot of innovation. And it pissed me off a little because I'm an Ethereum shareholder. I'm not a shareholder, I'm an Ethereum investor, and I hold ETH. And now I have exposure to Ethereum public markets as well. With that being said, my rant is over. ETH under 4,500, absolute steal. Why is Ethereum such a long-term bet?
sure, I'm going to explain it in a few ways, but I want to just acknowledge one thing. The Ethereum community has not done a great job over the years explaining what it is, why you should hold it, how is it different, and frankly, why does it have a license to win?
Mm,
Did you hear what I just said? Like, why
mm,
does it have a license to win? So let me tell you my view and why I joined SharpLink and why I believe so deeply in Ethereum and why working with Joe and the consensus team is just a dream job. So I spent 20 years at BlackRock, the most trusted asset manager in the world. But I think many people who grew up in the crypto community who've never had a brokerage account, have never worked in TradFi, may not understand how different that ecosystem is. And so I want to start by explaining how different it is. and then why I'm excited about Ethereum. So in the world of crypto, 24/7 you could trade. Things settle atomically. You get
Yeah.
finality. You don't have risk in that swap to your counterparty for the moment. You don't have to settle overnight. And the traditional ecosystem is like that. You want to buy a bond, you can't do it over the weekend. You buy it on a Friday or you sell it on a Friday. It doesn't settle till Monday. You don't even see it in your brokerage account until Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's retail. In institutional, there's trillions of dollars of friction. People who hold your money, people who you worry are not going to meet the terms of a trade. And there's all these centralized intermediaries with different databases who are siloed. The system is completely fractured, and everyone is taking a rent
Yeah.
through that process. So take a step back. What Ethereum offers and the L2s is a decentralized way to fundamentally change traditional finance. And I don't just mean the $4 trillion of the crypto community, but let's start there. Stable coins, smart contracts, programmability, they were invented on Ethereum, right? They were invented on Ethereum. Ethereum just went through and celebrated this past July 10 years since its mainnet launch. You can't say that about other L2s or the corporate L1s that are being built.
It's battle
Since the
tested.
first,
It's
since the
battle
first,
tested.
it's battle tested over the decade since its first Genesis block. It's gone through significant upgrades, built the strongest ecosystem. So why Ethereum and the L2s versus others? Now I'm going to focus on assets that matter, right? So Ethereum has over 60% of stablecoin activity. So over 60% is built on Ethereum and the L2s. Why does that matter? Because if you listen to Secretary Bessent, or Secretary of Treasury, he says stablecoins are going to go from 275 billion to 3 trillion plus. Largely, it's going to be on Ethereum. You're at the early innings of tokenizing funds. What do I mean by tokenizing funds? I just explained that funds and stocks and bonds are frictioned. Well, if you tokenize them, they can trade 24/7. They can be
Yeah.
programmable. They settle instantly. They're composable. Instead of trading a stock for $1 or even a tokenized stock for a stablecoin, why can't you trade stocks for one another? Why
Yeah.
can't you buy and lend them in DeFi? 80% of tokenized assets, starting small, are on Ethereum and the L2s. And then DeFi, which was invented for Ethereum and on Ethereum, if you look at the high quality DeFi, and I'm sorry, I'm not talking about meme coins and NFTs. I'm talking about DeFi economic activity that is buying and selling and exchanging and borrowing and lending, that high quality DeFi transactions. It's happening on Ethereum.
I mean, look at
And I
TVL.
know, look
Look
at
at
the
TVL.
TVL.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
TVL doesn't
activity,
lie.
yeah, that high quality activity, Matt. And I'm not talking about meme coins. I'm talking about the activity that's going to be sustainable in the long run. 10x on Ethereum and the L2s that derive security from Ethereum versus the next, which may be Tron, which may be Solana. So Ethereum has the license to win. And the final thing I'm going to say, and I'm not a maxi on anything. I want Bitcoin to succeed. I want ETH to succeed. And I want the ecosystem to grow. The final thing I will say, which is really, really, really important, is fundamentally institutions only care about two things: security and liquidity. Security and liquidity. They're not going to show up to the fancy new thing. It's going to be Ethereum because it's the most secure network and battle tested. And it's going to be Ethereum because that's where the trading and liquidity is. And that's different from some of the other chains. But Ethereum has competition, and Ethereum finally is explaining why they have the license to win. And I think that's why you're seeing the price of Ethereum rally relative to Bitcoin. And sorry, that's a really long explanation.
No,
I'm not a
that's fire.
maxi on anything, but that is why I believe they have a license to win.
That was absolute fire. We are getting very tight for time. Last question, we'll wrap up here, and we'll make
Sure.
this a two-parter because we're tight for time, and I might as well stretch my luck here, Joseph. What is next for you guys? Give me what's next for SharpLink. any big plans, and if you could tie in a little bit about the sort of ecosystem plays that you guys are doing. I know it's, again, when you're a private code, you can talk about tons of forward-looking stuff.
Mhm.
You can say whatever the hell you want. You're never going to get in trouble. You're the
Yep.
CEO of a huge public company. You can't open the floodgates for me. But what do you guys have planned next? Any big news coming out? And tell me a little bit about the operational sort of business side that you guys are working on too.
Sure. I think there's two or three things that are coming next. Like my first job was to hire the best talent who knows what they're doing, and we've hired that talent. We're hiring more. We're never going to be a company to run a DAT. You need a small number of really talented people. I'm
Yeah,
not going
gotta
to
be
have
lean.
1,000 people like Michael
Yeah,
Saylor. He does a great job, but that's not the business I want to be in. So that's number one. Number two is we've been pretty conservative around how we stake our ETH. Most of it is just a native staking through custodians. We have some exposure to liquid staking. I think stage two is after you walk, you start running,
yep,
which is, going to the ecosystem and seeing what is the most efficient way to get yield for our investors. And I don't mean the highest yield, I mean yield that is risk adjusted. Like
the
you could do
safest.
crazy
Yeah,
things and make 20%, but that's not what treasury companies should do.
20.
Treasury should,
Joseph, you can make 100. You could make
okay.
three digits
But
if you wanted to.
but if your first goal is not to lose the treasury's money,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Like
of
this is
course.
not a hedge fund. You have to
Yep.
be smart about it. So we are the second largest corporate holder of Ethereum in the world. We have the backing and expertise from Consensus. So the next thing you're going to see is us going out into the ecosystem across staking opportunities, across liquid staking tokens, across potentially vaults, across OTC opportunities, across lending opportunities, and figure out how can we pick the best protocols to get best risk-adjusted yield. Again, we're not swinging for home runs every day. We want to do this the right way. So you're going to see that. And by the way, it's going to also bootstrap and provide TVL and to provide liquidity to these protocols. And the ones who are most efficient, successful with the least smart contract risk are going to get the bulk of that allocation. So that's number one. And number two, we've said it publicly. We're in the early stages of figuring out what additional operating companies can we build that are both positive for the Ethereum ecosystem, but drive ETH denominated revenue for our shareholders. And not more to share right now. Those are the things that I'm most excited about, but we're going to do it with the smartest minds and in conjunction with Consensus. So we are
Well said.
really, really
I,
excited to do great things. And this is not a short-term trade. I look at our stock price every day, but I'm actually thinking about what the long-term value we can bring to our investors.
well said. Joseph, what an episode. Would love to do round two in person. A proper Joe Rogan banger. That'd be a lot of fun. Nice little 3-hour session because we barely scratched the surface. Again, big fan of what you and the team are doing. Congrats on the early success. I know the job is just getting started. Top of the first inning. Actually, the first inning isn't even on yet. Still singing the national anthem, which is awesome to see. You guys are doing a great job for the space and educating TradFi and the everyday Joe and Josephine about crypto and DATs too. So love that. Before we let you go, please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and of course SharpLink online and on socials.
Yep. SharpLink is sharplink.com. I am at Joe Shalom on X. And the final thing I'll say is when we started this, Matt, you gave a really important disclaimer about the birds. I don't know if I put them to sleep or they like my sing-song voice, but they've been absolutely silent since minute 3.
They have. You nailed it on the head. The birds came in clutch. I told them to light the STFU and they did. So shout out the beautiful parrots as well. Folks, we're in an episode with Joe Shalom, co-CEO of the one and only SharpLink, also known as SBET. SBET is their ticker, also a great ticker as well. What an epi, everything on Ethereum DATs, DAT financing structures. That was a really cool part of the show. I think the listeners will really like that. And of course, the long-term Ethereum investment thesis. What an episode. Huge shout out to Joe and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe, hammer that like button. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. To my team, you're the GOATs. Love you all. And back to the listeners, keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.